This lesson will discuss configuring while and do-while loops. The topics include: what is a while loop? What is a do-while loop? Why would you use a while or do-while loop instead of a for loop? And how would while and do-while loops be used in a website? Moving now to our code example, as you can see on line 6, we have an array of options. The options are in the form of a string separated by the pipe symbol terminated with an ampersand. You'll notice that each of the strings is variable in length. This is the perfect candidate for a while or a do-while loop. The while loop is extremely useful when the number of items to be examined varies. Examples include strings, files, database queries, and other times when you are unsure of the exact number of items. First, we'll look at the while loop, and then we'll discuss the do-while loop. The syntax for the while loop is seen on line 17. We have the word while followed by a space, which is optional. Inside the parentheses, we have a comparison expression. The comparison expression can be a complex expression involving nested parentheses and also or. In this case, it's a very simple expression, testing to see is $x less than 4. On line 17, at the end, we have the opening brace. On line 33 is the end of the code block. So all of the statements starting on line 18 through line 32 will be executed repetitively inside the while loop while the condition is true. On line 20 and ending on line 30, we have an example of a do-while loop. The difference between the two is that the while loop puts the condition in the beginning, whereas the do-while loop puts the condition at the end. Therefore, the do-while loop will always execute at least one time. In this example, again, the block starts on line 20 with the opening brace. On line 30, we have the closing brace, followed by the condition, in this case, while flag being a Boolean, either true or false. Notice that the semicolon must terminate the while clause. The code starting on line 21, going all the way through to line 29, will be executed repetitively inside the do-while loop. It will be executed at least one time, and then as many times as the while clause remains true. Looking at the logic now, let's have a look and see what this block of code is going to do. So we have an index we're using called $x. On line 18, we have another index which is used to refer to the position within the string. On line 19, we're echoing two div tags, an outer and an inner div tag. On line 20, we start the do-while loop. We examine the string one character at a time using the subster command. You'll notice that we're referring to the array of options. We're using the position parameter, which is incremented, and the length is 1. We set the flag. We test to see if the character is the pipe symbol. If so, we close the inner div tag and generate a new inner div tag. Else, we check to see if the character is an ampersand, in which case we set the flag to false, which allows us to break out of the loop. And finally, the else clause: if none of the above are true, the character is simply echoed to the screen. Once the do-while loop has terminated because the flag is set to false, on line 31, we have the two div tags closed, a paragraph tag, X is incremented, and we're now back to the while loop on line 17. This construct is also referred to as nested loops. You can put while loops inside of while loops. You can also mix and match between for loops and while loops. But please bear in mind that the while loop is useful when you have an unknown number of items or a variable number of items, whereas the for loop is most useful when there's a fixed number of items. So let's move over to the browser and have a look at this code example. So as you can see, we've generated a survey. How will you arrive? Car, bus, train, plane. Your gender, male, female. Preferred housing. How many in the family, etc. In review, what is a while loop? It's much like a for loop, except that the block of commands are executed while the comparison expression is true. What is a do-while loop? A do-while loop is the same as a while loop, except that the block of commands are executed before the condition, which means that the do-while loop executes at least one time. Why would you use a while or do-while loop instead of a for loop? You'd use these two loops if you need to loop through commands which operate on data of which the quantity or length is unknown or can vary. How would while and do-while loops be used in a website? They are oftentimes used in conjunction with file operations and database queries, again, where the size of the file can vary and the results from the database query can vary. This concludes our discussion of configuring while and do-while loops.